A
Oh, no, I
dad.
found out what that was. Yeah, I
Oh,
got rid of it. Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. No, no, no. This is good kind. This is something I want to eat, not poop. So,
All right. Hello and welcome to the QUACKCAST. This is QUACKCAST number 423. I'm Ozone Ocean, and of course we have Pit Face. Hi, Pit.
hi, Ozone.
Baines. Hi, Baines.
Hello.
And Tance is on mute because
Hello. The only reason why I actually took those few years of Greek was just so I could somewhat bumble through the accent, and not very well.
But Greeks sound Italian, Tance, so yeah.
Potato, potato.
Hello. Let's go eat pasta at the Acropolis.
No, Greeks are better. So we're talking about weapons in this QuackCast. Fictional weapons in sci-fi, fantasy, whatever that are your favorite weapons, and we have also a thread on the duck somewhere where we can find examples of people talking about that as well. So I'll just go into that. Yeah, so weapons in fiction. It's a very interesting and fun topic that we can just chat about. But before we get into that, I have to mention the featured comic and the featured music. So first up, the featured comic. I featured a comic with many fictional weapons in it this week. Okay, the featured comic this week was Operation Boom! Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Operation Boom! A dangerous mastermind, the Gentleman, has hijacked control over the world's robotic drone armies. Only one small mercenary group of combat experts stands between him and total anarchy. Among them is his daughter, Boom. They embark on a reckless frontal assault against his desert stronghold in an effort to regain control of the robotic military force. Operation Boom is brimming with fast-paced, exciting action, combat, explosions, and more. It really is action-packed. The art is real eye candy, drawn with pencil and then digitally inked and coloured to a professional level, quite stylized in an angular fashion, featuring great foreshortening and use of perspective on figures. The story is an action-adventure that rockets forward at a great speed. Break out the popcorn and enjoy Operation Boom, Reckless Hero, rated E. This is a team of 3 different creators, I think 2 artists, 3 artists, and one of them's a writer. Alright, so you might also remember another comic from this team, Reckless Hero, was The Last Sheriff, which was a sci-fi comic about sort of Old West in space with a sheriff and, lots of blasters and all that kind of stuff. And actually, Gunwallis just did the theme music to Reckless Sheriff, I think it was last week of the week. No, that was Tusk. But a couple of weeks ago, so you can enjoy that as well. Anyways, so have a read of Operation Boom. It's very, I would say, anime style in the story. So you'll be sort of very used to all those kind of tropes showing up here. So, yeah, have a look. Operation Boom by Reckless Hero. Rated E, although that rating should probably be changed to at least a T. Okay. Enjoy. And that was our featured comic, Operation Boom! Okay, so after that we have the featured music. Gumwallace has given us the theme to, wait for it guys, wait for it, Baines. Wait for it.
Wait, I'm here.
The theme to Bottomless Waitress. Oh my god.
What?
I'm expecting some real heavy bass and
butt bouncing music.
Yeah.
I expect a really tinny, kind of Dolly Parton sounding song that you can barely make out.
You're right.
Like a radio in a diner.
You would be right, Baines.
Oh, really?
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But I'll describe it for you. This is such a happy-sounding, southern, joyful track filled with banjo and layers of guitar twanging away. bringing notes of sunshine, natural wood and light, glinting softly through the leaves and making dappled shadows on the ground, perfect for an advertising jingle. Slip into a comfy booth, get your butt comfortable on our soft cushions and enjoy a plate of down-home cooking in this fine establishment filled with a cast of friendly ladies. Try a plate of our famous bottomless fries, a cup of our delicious bottomless coffee, and the sight of our lovely bottomless waitresses. So take it away, Gumballus, with Bottomless Waitress.
Rated X.
We're back. That was a marvelous themed Bottomless Waitress by our marvelous Gunwallis. Thank you for that, Gunwallis. Yeah. Awesome, I should say.
Yeah, awesome.
So, weapons. I'm hearing funny sounds. Is that some kind of weapon? It's not you, Baines.
It could be Pitt.
All right.
She may be coming back.
She may be. Well, speaking of sound weapons, one of the worst ones, I think, was the sound weapon in Dune, the film. Have you seen that? The David Lynch version? Oh,
no.
David Lynch version of Dune, starring Kyle MacLachlan and Patrick Stewart, Dean Stockwell, also Jürgen Prochnow, I think, was in there as well. All sorts of famous people were in Dune, the film. But they changed it, the big weapon in that film to be this weird sound thing. So they shout into this microphone and it produces this sound that can destroy stuff. And,
yeah, it's clever.
Yeah, but it didn't have anything to do with the book. So,
right.
Yeah, it's clever, in a way of thinking about it. Yeah, but it's just did not fit in with the Dune universe, so that was a bit disappointing. So that is not a favorite weapon in fiction for me.
Do you are you a fan of the James Bond type weapons and gadgets they would make a big deal out of in every movie? A watch that turns into a bomb and
I did.
Codpiece that turns into a rocket ship.
I love that one the best. That was my favorite.
Yeah. I don't really know those movies that well either.
The James Bond gadgets really came to the fore in the Roger Moore era. So that was really his thing. So Sean Connery, I don't know what Lazenby had. Never saw that film. But Sean Connery had some subtle things. Yeah, pens that turn into guns and stuff like this. Or a strangulation wire on a watch, that kind of simple stuff.
Yeah.
But it was Roger Moore who had all the good gadgets and weapons. Yeah, I loved it. Submarine cars and motorbikes that turn into aeroplanes and stuff like that. So yeah, I loved them. Back when I was a young kid, I loved it. So you don't have any particular favorites from that?
I just had a vague recollection. I thought I knew that you were a little more Bond aware than I was, but I remember in general, I remember those scenes where Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Your lapel becomes a hot air balloon.
Well,
I'm trying to think of fake ones. I don't remember any real ones, but yeah, the watches that do various things. The gum that you swish together, that's Mission Impossible. You swish the gum together and it becomes a bomb,
Yeah.
It almost sounds like the inventiveness of Batman, the old Adam West Batman style gadgets and whatnot,
Yeah.
Well, that was popular back in the early... Well, that was probably in the 70s and the 80s, yeah. Was Batman the 60s?
Yeah.
I think it was, yeah. That was a long time ago. Yeah, and Maxwell Smart, for goodness sake. He had those kind of ridiculous things. Shoe telephones and everything like that, yeah. So, yeah, that...
Shoe telephones, that's right. It's funny.
That was the thing. I don't know. They were sort of a favourite, but a very childish kind of favourite, because that's not something you really go to as an adult. So yeah, weapons in fiction. I think we just did the video, so we're a bit flat-footed here because we're talking about it again. Our Patreon video. If you're a $5 and up Patreon, you can watch our video. But yeah. So my favorite things were the giant swords. That was the main thing. So ridiculous, cartoonish sized swords. Cloud Strife, Final Fantasy VII, huge Nadashis. It's a Japanese huge katana, that kind of stuff. I love those because they're cartoonish in proportion. They're way bigger than a person can normally use, and which means and it's normally the kind of people who handle it, like Cloud Strife. He's a very effeminate kind of small character, so it emphasizes that ridiculousness of it.
Right.
So yeah, that way the weapon has it's almost a character in its own right, and that's when it becomes interesting or fun. And giant guns are the same, like a Spriggan, which is a fun anime movie. There's this one scene where this guy, he's a normal sized human, but he can get really, really powerful just by his body systems sort of go overload, and he gets really strong, and he rips an autocannon from a car and just blasts away at this other bigger guy who also has the same kind of power, and just obliterates him using this autocannon. And I love that because because everybody grabs miniguns these days in films and TV and animation. It's always someone using a minigun, but this is an autocannon, and so an autocannon is a heavy machine gun that fires exploding shells, like 20 millimeter, 30 millimeters, something like that. Huge bullets about a foot long, and a person could never handle one. A human being could never hold one and fire one. But yeah, this normal sized guy rips one off and just starts firing, and it looks so cool. So yeah, I like that kind of thing because it's a cartoonish expression of power, I think. And it really did emphasize that this character had attained kind of over human, superhuman strength in order to be able to do that.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the miniguns and stuff, because that sort of weapon seems to be the mainstay of things like, when the big bad guy has a legion of underlings and they fall on the hero and try to blast him away. They always have, it's almost more these days the mark of a bad guy to have a minigun.
Yeah, it is these days, isn't it? Yeah, some baddie comes out with it and he's like a mid boss, and you have to get rid of him. And yeah, so that's why it's an intimidating thing.
Well, kind of almost like a symbol in a sense of it's still a powerful weapon, right? But it could be disseminated earlier or easier among, if you do have a big throng of bad guys, that go around and beat it, and it's almost connected to a mob thing too, right? It's it gives the bad guys an edge over the everyday human, right?
Yeah.
But it's not canon and stuff. It's still kind of interesting.
Yeah, the miniguns. Yeah, that what they usually happen. Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, they started off in film, obviously in Predator, then Terminator 2, so they were a good guy weapon in those films. But yeah, now it's the bad guy comes along with it on his car or a boat or something like that. Normally, it's a more.
I was saying
scenario.
minigun this whole time. I meant more of the small automatic guns, not miniguns. I wasn't thinking.
Oh, you mean like submachine guns?
Yeah, submachine guns. No wonder why you're kind of like, what? I got you.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, submachine guns are only bad guys ever have submachine guns. It's usually an MP5, I think. The HK MP5, and that's started in the 80s, and everybody used to be Uzis. They always had Uzis.
Yeah.
And yeah, now it's MP5s. Everyone always has MP5s. It's just universal. In reality, the only people you'll see having MP5s normally are policemen in places like Greece and Turkey and stuff like that, which is interesting.
Well, and there are lots of places.
Spain as well.
It just depends on whether they carry them openly and stuff like that. But, or SWAT teams and stuff like that are like associated with that kind of thing and whatnot. Or, but in fiction, that's like the weapon of being the bad guy. You don't very often see good guys running around with submachine guns.
No,
not anymore.
Good guys have usually it's an M15. That's what they're gonna have. That's the good guy gun.
That's what like Chuck Norris has when he goes
M16. Yeah,
goes and berate a camp of people in like Vietnam or something like that, or like eagle screeching in the background and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And the bad guy weapon always used to be, before the submachine gun, always used to be the AK-47 or AK-74, whatever. It's the AK was a bad guy weapon. Now it's, because that was symbolized, because it came from, when was it, like the Cold War. So the Soviets, that was the Soviet weapon. That was the Viet Cong weapon. That was the East German weapon. But now these days, the AK it doesn't really have, it can the terrorist weapon as well. So the terrorists would have the AK. The mob would have the MP5, or like sophisticated bank robbers. Terrorists would have the AKs. Now it's either gang members have AKs, or it depends. It's weird. It's the movie weapons of choice. But there is a lot of symbolism in it. It isn't just a factor of, like you say, it's there is a reason for giving them those weapons. It's not just whatever weapon we feel like. They're given it for a specific reason.
Yeah, they're kind of coded in a way.
They are. Highly coded, yeah. So, like for pistols, a bad guy once upon a time would always have a Luger. That was what a bad guy would have. It didn't matter if they were German or not. If they had a Luger, they were a bad guy. Or one that looks like a Luger, like those Walthers. Whatever that Walther pistol is. Like the man with the golden gun, that kind of thing. It has that, And, if we're going further back, a symbol of like the good guy with the gun was like the Browning 1911. That was what your detectives, your police people had. Not police. Your in the noir films. In a noir film,
like Private Eyes and stuff. Yeah, you said detective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'd have the Browning 1911. That was their weapon of choice, and a bad guy in that might have had a Luger. So yeah, that was the kind of thing. So yeah, the weapons have symbolism for whatever reason. Yeah, so that's for firearms. What about for bladed weapons? I think the old symbolism for bladed weapons, for weapons in fiction, were always the bad guys would have curved weapons, so it would be the scimitar. So
yeah.
The Eastern world, the Arabic world, something like that, were always, because it goes back to the Crusades. So the baddies had the scimitars, the good guys had the straight swords, and that's just how it was.
into things like clubs or like even like morning stars and stuff like that. If you had that, you might not be a bad guy, but you are more of a barbarian kind of class. Yeah.
Exactly. Simple weapons. Yeah. Or like a morning star, that might be... Oh, a morning star, yeah. I'm thinking of a shuriken. yeah. Morning star or a mace. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, so that's a big thug kind of weapon. Exactly. So yeah, weapons are always coded. Like if you have a spear, spears are only ever used by like extras. Like the name spear carrier comes from extra. The spear carrier means extra because of the role they had in Shakespearean plays. So yeah,
and that's something that's easy to reproduce. So
yeah, it's cheap.
If you want to have a bunch of people in a swords and sandal epic that are, ready to throw down, the best way to kind of symbolize that is give them spears. It's easy to see and it's easy to communicate and they're easy to create, Yeah,
exactly. But in reality, apparently the spear was the main weapon of armies back then. But it's since come to mean from fiction, the sword is coded as a hero weapon. So a hero or a main villain will carry a sword. And that's just how it is. They never carry spears. Ever. So yeah, swords. I think my earliest favorite sword from fiction was Excalibur. Because that's a super classic. And I don't just mean from the the John Borman film of Excalibur. I mean, just in general, that was like, you'd read King Arthur everywhere. There's a million versions of it. And Excalibur was the primo sword, even though no one knows what it's meant to look like. That was the best ever. Yeah. So
I do like weapon. I'm not a huge weapons fan, as I mentioned, but I like weapons that are plot specific and have like, they're part of, like, there's a lot of story to them, like Excalibur. I do love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you said like the Sword and the Sorceress, I think it was?
Yeah, the Sword and the Sorcerer, he had a really cool kind of sword. That was just a cool sword. I don't remember if it was plot specific, but it was character specific.
It was
gave the character a
pretty
coolness.
Important to the movie. I mean, it was on
was
the
it?
cover
It's
of
been so long.
the video.
Right.
I think it's like one of those magical weapons like the Krull, You can only defeat the bad guy if you can wield this sword. It's just...
The show Supernatural in its early seasons had this gun. This is going to sound silly, but it was cool. It was cool on the show. There was a gun that was built in the Old West. It was a revolver. And it was magically designed to be able to kill pretty much anything. This show has powerful beings on it, like powerful monsters, and then even demons and like angels and like higher order of beings. So if the heroes were able to get their hand on this gun, had a limited number of bullets, but it was able to kill almost anything. These higher order creatures. That was cool. So like because it didn't make the heroes more powerful. The villains were still more powerful, but it gave them, if they were able to find this thing, it gave them kind of a fighting chance.
An edge.
As normal people. Yeah.
Oh, how cool. So yeah, like you say, it has very plot specific meaning. It's not just something someone picks up. It's
right. Normal weapons with magical properties. I do like that kind of stuff. That's neat.
Yeah, those are pretty fun. Those ones. I can't really think of many examples of those. Even Excalibur doesn't really have that magical power.
It's more story. Yeah, Excalibur's coolness is more the story. Like its power as a plot device and as a story, an engine of story and stuff like that.
Yeah. Whoever holds the sword.
Destiny, whoever holds this thing. Thor's hammer, only the worthy, if you're worthy, you can pick it up. Like that kind of stuff. I do like that kind of stuff. It's cool.
Yeah. So that's the comic book Thor. Yeah, it's
right. Yeah, right. Not the actual Greek myth.
Greek myth. Our Scandinavian listeners are all spitting blood at the moment. At you.
I'm sorry. I read too many comics that rotted my brain.
Tangriznia. That's the name of Thor's goat, which means teeth grinder. And now we know why he's got that name. Because he heard you talk about it.
Yeah, well, they're grinding like crazy. Here's a weapon for you. And Who Framed Roger Rabbit? The PI gets a cartoon gun. And he opens the bullet pack, and there are like 6 bullets with personalities.
Oh, yeah.
Cowboys and Indians. And he fires, one of my favorite scenes in a movie, he shoots his bottle, he quits drinking, decides to stop drinking, he throws his whiskey bottle up in the air, fires the gun, and a native like bullet comes flying out. So flying up the bottle, and he pulls out this gigantic axe. The bullet pulls out a gigantic axe and like chops the bottle. A weapon within a weapon within a weapon.
That's a good film. I must watch it. Yeah, and it had the most evil weapon ever, which was the judge had the paint thinner in the barrels.
All right,
a chemical weapon.
Yeah.
Oh yes,
that was just horrible. It was the most evil
springs in his
ever.
shoes.
See, that's another definite bad guy weapon. You know, acid and all that kind of stuff, and
right.
Oh yeah. Oh, what about one of the coolest weapons for me is mecha. I love mecha, and one of the coolest weapons. Yeah, who would have guessed? But one of the coolest examples of that was Ed 209 from RoboCop. And what you said about acid it reminded me of that scene where the guy gets his face melted off with the caustic, whatever it was. Some poor guy gets melted by acid. But yeah, Ed 209 in that film, oh my god, now that is just what little ozone ocean's dreams are made of. That thing was a monster. It was just so cool. Yeah, so I loved that. Also, another good weapon in that was the rifles they actually killed Ed 209 with. That was just these huge, I think they were meant to be 20mm cannons or something like that, but they were just giant cartoonish looking rifle. So yeah, but yeah, mecha.
Cool.
We've got Star Wars, the first Star Wars films. They were really cool because that really introduced like mecha to the world with the huge walker things, and then the AT-ATs and AT-STs, which was the Scout Walkers. So the mecha in Pinky TA is based on Scout Walkers and Ed 209 from RoboCop. So yeah, those
neat.
My influences. I love those. Those things, and they're only used by bad guys in films as well. So another bad guy thing, because bad guys are mechanized, which is, I think goes back to the like World War II. So we imagine the German army being highly mechanized. The myth of the World War II is that the Germans were highly mechanized and they had all the best mechanical weapons, and fiction sort of took that up by having all the bad guys are always highly mechanized, whereas the good guys, on the back of Panthers
it signals something very specific about what kind of bad guy you have then too. This isn't going to be like the Joker kind of bad guy, or like, it means that your main bad guy is going to be perhaps more stately or more of like almost like a dictator figure then, right? And like, for instance, Darth Vader and the Emperor and stuff like that. They're very specific bad guys who have those very specific sorts of weapons at their disposal, because you need to have a degree of power to even have weapons like that. You need a lot of people under you. You need people to create them and aim them and drive them and go out and do your will, so.
Yeah, exactly. You need a whole, economy behind you. You need an empire behind you or massive businesses or something. And like you say before, it signals stuff. So that really does signal way more than just a weapon. It signals that whole machinery and mechanics and of society behind it. That's well done.
It makes me think it would be cool to see, and I'm sure somebody must have done this somewhere, but it'd be cool to see somebody take on that kind of signaling and do it like where there's a world that has these mecha and stuff at their disposal. And it's not necessarily, the world who has them and isn't necessarily, they're not bad guys and stuff like that, but maybe just somebody who is unhinged, like, I don't know, like the Joker or something like that, gets a hold of one and just runs amok, just completely doesn't really know what they're doing, but still somehow manages to just causes havoc, it would be cool. It'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I sort of do that in, I think it's, what was it? Appleseed, the original Appleseed film. The terrorist gets a hold of. They had these in Appleseed. They have these gigantic mecha tanks that are just huge, and they're meant to guard the city because there's a whole big war that's happened, and everyone's rebuilt everything. And so they had these old derelict, huge giant tanks, and they're just out there to guard the city, and they'll be automatically controlled by this huge computer system. And some terrorist gets control of one, and he's just plowing through the city, and no one can stop him. And he's just got full control of this massive weapon, and he's running amok, like you say. And the job of the good guys is to try and disable this damn thing before it can get to the heart of the city and destroy the main computer that controls everything. So that's it's really effective in that, and that tank is so cool. It's so cool. Have you seen the Appleseed?
I have not.
It's a Masamune Shirow film. It's great.
Yeah, I'm aware of it. I don't know. I just haven't crossed paths with it yet. But
it's
if it's got a big tanky in it. So.
Oh yeah. So the first one is way better than any of the reboots. The reboots suck.
Oh really?
Oh yeah. They're just so bad. Most of them are CGI, and it's just they're not as fun. They're not as epic. Yeah, they're just not as good. Although a lot of people love them more, but those people lack taste. So. The first one is 1980s or early 90s kind of style, so it's has that coolness level, which really fits with the Masamune Shirow thing. And look, Masamune Shirow, one of the best comic guys and anime guys for fantastic weapons. If you've ever seen, of course, you guys have, Pit at least, you've seen Ghost in the Shell, the original version of that. That massive mecha tank in there, which he has to they destroy with all sorts of weapons, and it's done so well in that there's this huge invisible tank guarding this car with the puppet master on top. The puppet master's this robot thing they have to retrieve, but no one can see it, and so there's these huge chunks being ripped out of the wall next to Makoto, and they don't know why, and she suspects something's down there. She can sort of see in her thermal imaging goggles, so she goes and blasts out the roof of this building where this thing is, and the roof is all glass, and the glass shatters down, and it goes onto the hollow field of this tank, and this sparks come up, and it's rainbow and stuff like that, and the field can't take all the glass falling down, and the tank appears, and it's this huge spider tank.
I love it. Dude, legs. Even just thinking about that scene right now just gives me chills, man, because as soon as you see it, you're like, oh. It's a really big, amazing thing, and it's really cool. And that whole scene is just, it's gone down in anime history. It should be in just cinematic history in general, because it's just, you won't find anything else like it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's so cool. And because it's not like in so many modern, newer animes where a big tank like that is just cut in half with a sword in 2 seconds flat. It's undefeatable. It is a tank for a reason. she's shooting at it with her gun with, like, you know, the armor-piercing bullets. It does nothing whatsoever. She can't scratch it. She comes down and tries to rip its hatch off with her superhuman strength, because she's a robot, you know, she's a full, like, robot body. Her arms rip out of their sockets trying to rip the
well,
hatch
absolutely.
open.
And part of the effectiveness of that scene, too, isn't just that she's there and it's firing at her and it could kill her. She also needs to rip at it and get into it because the puppet master is in there, and it goes, she's had all these questions and she wants to find the puppet master, not to necessarily to distribute justice, but because she has these questions within herself and her being, and the puppet master may be able to illuminate some of these things, you know? And so she needs to get to the enemy because it's her own
identity.
Yeah, her own identity relies on getting in there. And that's why it's an amazing scene. As she's trying to get into the tank, her body is ripping. She's sacrificing her body because she needs to get there, you know, and it's just amazing. Oh, it's a beautiful scene.
Yes, there's a lot of levels to it. Not only is the tank showing that it is a tank, it's an obstacle in her character development as well. So, like you say, yeah, it's a really effective symbolism, as well as being used well as a tank. So,
yeah.
It's a well done film, and Masami Nishiro is a guy who understands the use of weapons in his cyberpunk fiction. He uses them effectively every single time. Weapons are not just empty, silly props. They are like story-specific, symbolic, but also weapons for a reason, which is what I really respect about his writing. It's well done. I was going to say, you know, one of the other things I wanted to include in the QUACKCAST was the idea of, you know, in reality, the experience of reality is very different from the experience in, like, fantasy and fiction of these kind of things. But even though it is, you know, and the experiences in reality and the experience in fiction are both valid but separate. That's perhaps a topic for another QUACKCAST because it's pretty complicated. But reality has to inform fiction for fiction to really work, you know, especially with something like a weapon. And I think Masami Nishiro, or, you know, I think Masanori Ota, I think he's the one who directed Ghost in the Shell, really understood weapons in order to be able to depict them like that. You know, like there's the scene in the start of the thing where she's hunting the some kind of terrorist guy. He thinks he's a terrorist, and he has a submachine gun loaded with high-powered ammunition, and he doesn't care because he's only using it for this particular heist. And it's blasting out. It's so powerful that he's knocking him back. You see him skidding in the water where he's running in this, like, flooded area of the city, and it's ripping the gun apart too. It's running far too hot. And for that scene, you really see that, you know, this sort of makes sense. He's not just firing unlimited bullets from a normal gun like you see in, you know, films all the time. He's actually, you know, firing a certain kind of ammunition. It's having an effect. It's, you know, something that's really intimidating to Makoto. So she, you know, she's not running into it like, you know, water squirted out from a water pistol. It really is intimidating and having an effect. And the ammunition messes up the gun, and so he can't fire it anymore. And, you know, Makoto knows that, and so she's able to come in and grab the guy and get him because he destroys his own gun. So that kind of understanding that the director had, that the people had who did the film, were of, you know, reality, was able to add an extra layer of story to it. So yeah, that's quite interesting. And if you've ever fired a real gun, they're not, guns are not like you know, things that characters can just throw away or just easily fire without, any reaction. Actually, firing a gun is a very physical, kind of visceral thing. You feel that recoil, especially a high-powered rifle. You feel that recoil through your whole body. It thumps into you. It's extremely hard to be able to line up the sights and fire, hit something at a distance. All that kind of thing. Your breath matters to, the rise and fall of the muzzle. All that kind of stuff. Loading a bullet is actually a really interesting feeling. You put the bullet in and you go lock it in with the bolt. That kind of stuff. It's when you know that kind of thing, it informs your handling of it in fiction a lot more. And I'm not saying the experience in reality is, superior or, that's a better feeling. I'm saying the experience of it really does help inform and help make your fiction a lot better. But sort of gone up my own ass a bit there. So yeah, you guys come in with some kind of fantasy weapon.
Well, no, but I mean, these are things that were conversation. And you have had quite an insight on all of this stuff because weapons have been an interest of yours for a long time. And weapons in many different kind of ways and stuff. So, I think it goes without saying you're probably going to be leading the conversation a little bit, but it's not a bad thing, Anyway, so my favorite weapon is my own mind. It's very charged, very
fictitious weapon too. So they're actually
I'd say I like the weapons that are, it's weird for me to think about because, so in my own comics, I don't have a lot of weapons usage. They're there, but I don't put a lot of effort into them. But there are some things like Tread's Mega Tank, and that reflects I adore tanks and that kind of thing. I love them. Probably because I've been fortunate enough to never have to face one down, but it'd probably bleak in my adoration. But I love tanks, and I really love the notion of things kind of put together from scrap to create something. This kind of which fits like the post-apocalyptic world of putrid meat. And I got the idea for that mega tank from an old Voivod cover called, very appropriately, Roar. Well, it's like Roar because it's really long, but there's like umlauts over the A's or something. But I love the design on there, and so I didn't take that design, but I was inspired by that design to make the tank. And then, my weapons, when I have weapons that stick around in putrid meat, they tend to be conventional. I have the tank. Warhead himself can kind of be considered a weapon. He is this created being, that was made.
Pit froze. She was going to tell us about Warhead, the bioweapon, who is half shark, half human. White pointer shark man. General Warhead, who unfortunately meets his ignominious end in putrid meat. Pit has got. Well, Pit was saying, she's got the mega tank in putrid meat. Pit actually got to ride around in Tiger 131, which is the only, I think, surviving operating Tiger 1 tank left. She got to actually ride around in the real thing a couple of years ago in Bovington Tank Museum in Britain. And you see that exact tank driving around in the movie Fury. So yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing. So she's experienced the reality, and I'm pretty sure that will inform her fiction, although her mega tank was created before she rode in that.
Right.
But yes, that's a rather interesting thing, because once upon a time the Tiger was, the baddest of the bad tanks, like the Mega Tank in her comic, and say in film, Tiger tanks feature quite heavily as an ultimate bad guy, because that was how people did think of them. They were the supreme bad guy personified in films. The version of Germany at its most Teutonic and monstrous on the battlefield, a massive armored machine that nothing can defeat. So yeah, a very symbolic thing. Apparently, it's sort of a myth that there's a lot of myths surrounding it. So the reality is that Germany did not have very many Tiger tanks, and even fewer Tiger 2 tanks, and they're originally just as used as like super heavy weapons. So there would be things that you'd send in to break through stuff, but they were used as sort of normal tanks, but badly misused as that, and they didn't really have enough of them. They never produced that many of those particular tanks. Most tanks that they had in World War II were Panzer IVs and Panzer IIIs and stuff like that. That's what you would have seen more of. And apparently most of the other myth goes that the German army was highly mechanized with tanks and half-tracks and Stuka dive bombers and all that. And you see that in fiction in World War II movies all the time. But the reality was that the German army was mostly horse-drawn. So they had supplies being taken along with carts and stuff like that. Yeah.
Really? Oh, okay. Well,
they still had cavalry in the early part of the Second World War. So yeah, that's something we don't get to see, just because the fiction of it, like Pitt says, you emphasize your bad guys as having a whole empire behind them by showing them all being mechanized and highly efficient. So that indicates that by having all sorts of technical kind of things, like in Star Wars. So the bad guys in Star Wars are based on Nazis, obviously, and they have all the cool weapons, apart from the TIE fighters, which are crap.
But yeah, they have the resources. They're powerful. They seem less human, but also obviously a
faceless,
formidable enemy. Yeah, they're faceless.
They have the Star Destroyers, which were one of my favorite weapons in fiction. Yeah, I love those things. They
seem to always like sort of rope and cable oriented. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, so you're more a Indiana Jones kind of weapon guy.
Well, like Indy, but you're mentioning Star Wars, and I'm just thinking, like, I love Boba Fett, and he in one of the I guess Jedi, he fires out a cable that wraps around Luke. And then he's also got the jetpack on his back. He's such a cool, he's just a gadget having very unusual character and unique character in that universe.
Yeah,
with his costume that does all this stuff and everything. I always liked the idea of shooting out a rope or a cable. When I was a kid and we used to play, we always had that. We always had wristbands that would fire a cable way up and we could lift up, Then of course Batman had something like that in the movie too.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I think Boba Fett was definitely a favorite. When we were kids, when we were playing Star Wars, you'd either be Boba Fett or Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
those were the two favorites. Not the Harrison Ford character.
It would be Harrison or Chewie. I'd be Han or Chewie.
Really?
Yeah, even Chewie.
Chewie. Oh.
He got a cool weapon too, a neat looking weapon. At least I don't know what kind of sense it makes.
Oh,
He's got the laser crossbow there.
It's so moronic, really, from an
ape
adult
with a
perspective.
Crossbow.
Yeah,
but it's still
a crossbow
cool.
that shoots lasers. You think, okay, you can take the bow part off.
Such a strange idea, but it's neat.
Oh, and they were fantastic weapons. As fictitious weapons go, all the weapons in Star Wars, none of them make any sense. Not a single one of them makes sense in reality, but they were awesome fictitious. Because like so. Chewie's got his crossbow blaster.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, you go.
No, please.
Oh,
you'll get there, I think.
So Chewie's got his crossbow blaster. We've got Han with his like broom handle Mauser turned into a blaster as well. So it's just like the crossbow. They all shoot like plasma bolts. The stormtroopers, I think they have Sten guns or something like that turned into blasters again. Mm-hmm. So we've all got our blasters that shoot super slow, glowing light things that and
so we can see them. It's visually it works.
Exactly, visually it works. Then you've got the Star Destroyers, gigantic things that shoot tiny little blaster things. So,
pew pew pew.
Exactly, gigantic, massive ships, and they have little tiny gun turrets on them. And they go, pop, 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 and a single X-wing can take them out. The AT-ATs, which is these huge walking things, they look so freaking cool. They've only got 2 guns on their little heads, and they go, pew, pew, pew. And there's no reason for them to exist at all. Why walk to the station? Why would they have built these things? I mean, in the instance in Empire Strikes Back, they sort of make sense in that there's shield generators, so they can't attack from space or whatever, so they have to approach from the ground. But why would they have made huge walking things just on the off chance that they'd have to do this kind of assault? It's it just doesn't make any sense. Right. So it's none of it makes sense, but it's still cool because it just looks fantastic, and that's the rule of cool.
Yeah.
Which is an important thing.
You cut out there a little bit at the beginning. I didn't hear if you mentioned lightsabers, but
the biggest one, the elephant
obviously
in the
room, iconic. Yeah, exactly.
Is the
which
lightsaber.
Are beautiful as a thematic, like kind of this old style thing that's coming back, and like this sort of elegance, an elegant weapon from a more civilized age. Like this idea, but still making like it's not just a sword; it's a laser sword. It's like this fencing idea, and it really, it works for what it's supposed to do so well.
Yeah, these weapons are the apex of fictional weapons because they don't work at all in reality, but they work beautifully within that universe.
Yeah,
they're for that unit, they're for that story, and they're beautiful in that story. So laser, well, they would be, I think, well, to give it some kind of scientific kind of reality, they would be plasma swords. That's the way they would be, and they would have like a magnetic field that contains the plasma, so that can sort of work. So these right. Fantastic glowing swords, they can reflect laser bolts, well, plasma bolts, whatever, back on the user. So that's cool. They can cut through almost anything. You can cut through the ground. You can cut through hands.
Yep.
Wrists,
really good at cutting through hands.
Yeah. So they are just beautiful, and they glow. They make these sound effects when they swing, woo, 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 sort of stuff.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah. So cool. I think they were put into in order, like you say, to emphasize some sort of elegance, some sort of magic almost. So they refer to a different magical era away from this technical, like gun focused era to an era where there was more of this magic, more of this airy fairy stuff. Mm-hmm. So there's that. So there's sort of kind of knightly weapon almost. So saying knights. And I think also a big part of it was the fact that Lucas was influenced by samurai movies. So yes. I think the Hidden Fortress, I think the first Star Wars film was based on.
Oh, okay. Was it?
I think so. So we've got that as an influence. That's why Darth Vader's helmet is like flared out, so it looks like a samurai helmet. Of course.
Yeah.
And at the swords as well. So we call them lightsabers, but they're really katanas. That's why they've got the extra long handle, and the blade is a certain length. So they're exactly proportional to katanas, and the fighting style is all katana fighting as well. So it's Yeah, that's the reason they look the way they do, and they look so cool when they're being used. It's just those sword fights are fantastic.
So much, yeah, really great.
Just
ingenious,
awesome.
Really.
Yeah. Speaking of swords, one of my favorite weapons in fiction as a sword was Princess Bride with the rapiers. I love those.
Okay. Yeah.
And my other one was Conan the Barbarian with his massive choppy sword.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure.
The spinning and all that, which is
yeah,
again based on katanas and kenjutsu. I think is the style of fighting that was based on. That's why they've got extra long handles and really short blades.
Right.
But, yeah. Like so amazingly awesome, and it doesn't make sense in reality because you don't want a straight bladed sword being that short. Really, it's not so great, and it's really, really heavy, super heavy sword. Again, that doesn't make sense to have a really heavy sword being that short, but it looks fantastic. It works in this fictional universe.
Yeah,
Arnie heaving away with this damn thing. So yeah,
it's kind of all about what it looks like and what it kind of represents, or
exactly.
Like, does it fit with what you're trying to do with the character, with the thematic things in the movie in general?
Exactly. Yeah, it's those weapons have to have those kind of layers. Looking cool, symbolism, themes, as well as fitting with the universe and the world. So that's why baddies have MP5s. Schmeiser, machine gun. I think that's what they used to have even before MP5s. It was the Schmeiser. Before the MP5, before the AK, that was the German submachine gun from the World War II films. Black and evil looking.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas the goodies had like Thompson machine gun or something like this. It was there. Or even, I don't even know what the goodies used to have in the world, like a Sten gun or something, or a grease gun. I think that was the goodies.
Okay.
Weapon.
Yeah. Remember the sword in Roger Rabbit that he pulls it out and just starts singing?
I do not remember that.
Why do I keep going back to Roger Rabbit? It had weapons that stood out to me.
Have you seen The Mask?
I have, yes. I saw it. I think I only saw it once or twice.
Yeah, well, he had those ridiculous cartoon weapons too.
Right. Yeah, very much based on the same source material, this wacky cartoons.
Precisely. He'd pull out a gun and it's like it'd have, a million kind of barrels and chains of bullets and all sorts of stuff. Absolutely hyper cartoony kind of weapons. So you mentioned weapons that have like magical properties or real plot specific kind of elements to them.
Yeah.
Can you think of many more like that? I know like there's Judge Dredd has his particular gun that Enforcer, I think they're called. Isn't that what it's called?
Lawgiver.
Oh, yeah.
Lawgiver, yeah.
Lawgiver.
Lawgiver. That's so they have their specific gun.
Oh, thank God I came back right in time.
That saved us from messing up Judge Dredd. So I haven't seen the Dredd film. I think that was the second version of. But does he have the special gun with all the special abilities?
Oh yeah, he does. Yeah, and they use it pretty well.
Okay.
So
you can tell it not to kill, or can tell it to be lethal and blow up things, and
it's got all the fancy smashy settings. There's some cool scenes with it. I think you could appreciate where it's pretty fun.
Well, those are really clever guns. So that is an unusual thing because good guys don't tend to have sophisticated like pistols that are
right. Yeah, but once again, engineered. Dredd is kind of in that gray area where he's the good guy of the series. You root for him, but at least as the years went on, there began to be this ethical ambiguity about him. Does he kind, and especially into the 80s and stuff, does he hedge on a sort of fascist thinking or that sort of thing, or is he so involved with the law that there's no humanity? What happens when humanity is removed from the law? And granted, that's kind of putting it in too blunt of terms, because Dredd does remain on the good guy side of things, right? So it doesn't really go into like, he
it's not like Judge Death. He doesn't say all life is a crime. He doesn't go that far.
But the question is kind of there. I remember there was this great big splash page in one of the issues. I can't remember which one, but there's this kind of inner dialogue that he has, and it shows him and stuff in this big kind of layout. But his dialogue is kind of more or less about how there's a hindrance to the idea of democracy. And yeah, it was really interesting that they kind of put that in there for his character. It was quite fascinating. So anyway, but once again, so since he is this kind of morally gray character, he's able to have such a strange gun,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's got like the tools of fascism without actually being a tool of fascism himself. That's basically boiling it down there. Well, they had what destroyed the whole world was a massive World War III or whatever in Judge Dredd.
The atomic war.
Yeah. And they have the elements
the
of that.
Apocalypse War, sorry.
Yeah, so they have these weapons like the ABC robots, Johnny Pineapple Head, that kind of thing.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah. Fantastic, excellent version of that in the film with Stallone. And one of the best elements is the ABC robot that comes alive and blasts everyone with its knuckle guns. So yeah.
Yeah, well, they eventually got their own series as well, the ABC Warriors. All have these really unique, different designs and these different personalities and stuff like that. And it's just so much fun.
Well, those are beautifully designed, because they're humanoid, so they have that to work with. But so you give them the signifiers of being more powerful than a normal humanoid. So you base it on like a really kind of big guy. You give them a lantern jaw, blunt nose, small nose, kind of apish features, huge shoulders, a massive chest, and you work around massive fists, that kind of thing. And they look powerful. They look like superhuman. And then you make them metallic and heavy looking and all this. So they really do emphasize the idea of something huge and powerful and intimidating that could crush you. So I love that.
Yeah. Or sometimes they could even be more slight. I remember there are a couple of them, I think, that have been more slight looking, which actually reminds me of the sort of intimidation that the T-1000 used in a way, because he was very slight and he was kind of another living, but he was absolutely effective.
Yeah.
In being intimidating and in being conveyed as a weapon rather than something really with a personality. The ABC Warriors are more personality based, but the T-1000 is more, even more so weapon based.
Oh yeah, he was like a nemesis. He was an unthinking force of nature, Jason kind of evil machine. Yeah, he was, and it was very effective. He couldn't use guns. I mean, he couldn't turn himself into a gun. He could use a gun. I don't think he ever did in the film, but he would use stabbing weapons because he couldn't.
Well, yeah, because he couldn't turn himself into something with moving parts and intricate moving parts. Schwarzenegger says that at some point. That's too detailed, but
I was just thinking, I love that scene where they're on the motorcycle, I think, and like they're doing all this exposition. Why doesn't he just become a bomb and blow me up?
Yeah.
You can't mimic complex machinery and like explaining everything. Well done. That's kind of good way to get all that explanation out of it.
And in the previous film, Schwarzenegger's character the first Terminator, he had been the ultimate force of nature weapon in a more kind of zombie kind of way, being more slow and relentless,
out of date.
Yeah.
But he was a relentless kind of and incredibly brutal serial killer.
Well, the first one, yeah. Never mind what I said, but yeah, he was, and he very much fit in that style of like slasherness that was also very effective at the time and whatnot. So,
shotgun was his main weapon, I think.
Yeah.
One-handed pump action shotgun.
And I always liked the way that he tried to find Sarah Connor in that movie for some reason, because, for all of his, the databases and whatnot, he has to rely on something very primitive, a phone book. And, since a phone book is only so accurate or not accurate, but so detailed in information, he goes and visits all these other Sarah Connors before he gets to meet Sarah Connor. I've always loved that as a little detail, man. It's so perfect.
Yeah, you cannot have that in today's film. 80s films, I think in the 80s, there was a real gadget focus. So you had a lot of these kind of weapons and interesting ideas. Johnny Five from Short Circuit, another, take on the whole weapon goes crazy, except weapon turns good in that film. So you've got highly sophisticated battle robot, stupid battle robot, highly sophisticated, and he turns into this friendly like bunny rabbit with a huge laser on his back. So yeah, it's interesting. And of course, many years later, you'll see them in the movie, whatever it was. Like there was this, shit, I can't remember what it was called. Disney film, 3D animated with this little robot.
I can't remember now.
Wall-E, yeah. He was exactly the same as Johnny Five, except he was smaller. It's a dwarf version of Johnny Five. But not a weapon, so we can't talk about that. The 80s ones produced a lot of good weapons. I don't know. I think they tried to do that again in Chappie, which I have not seen. The one with the Diane Ford people, Ninja and Yolandi. I tried watching that, but it was just too boring, so I didn't really get through it. It's a Neil Beauchamp film. The South African director who did Baines, you've seen this one. It's District 9?
Plan 9.
Plan 9. Plan 9 from the District. So that had fantastic weapons in it.
I'm not remembering offhand.
Well, they looked like video game kind of weapons. They'd be lots of colors and all this kind of stuff. Fantastic. Oh, well, we can't talk about it because I haven't really seen enough of the film, and you haven't seen it for years, and you never think about weapons.
I rarely think about weapons unless their story significant to the story.
Oh god, I love weapons in fiction. I can't believe that.
Yeah, well, that's an eye opener, man. Especially when you guys were talking about how the bad guys would have certain kinds of weapons and.
Yeah,
that's very cool stuff.
They code so much. They really do.
Yeah, you could play with that code though. I mean,
yeah, like in the Judge Dredd film, Judge Dredd universe, where he has the tools of fascism, those kind of weapons. Yeah, so it's reversed a bit there. You do see people playing with it sometimes, but it's too elemental, so the audience really don't get it. They don't really understand too much. You'd have to spell it out for them, the meaning.
Yeah.
So it's a visceral understanding. So the bad guys have AKs and the good guys don't. And if the good guys have them, it's because it's the only weapon available. They're stealing it from the bad guys, that kind of thing. The good guys don't use MP5s unless they're, SWAT team and they're just grunts and they're going to get killed anyway.
The other thing that comes to mind is Fury. As I was saying before, I might have gotten cut. Am I saying this? I love tanks and stuff like that. And one of the reasons why I love Fury so much is, one of the cool things about it is they almost just make this sort of good guy, bad guy distinction between the tanks as well, because you have the Shermans. Whenever you see the American, the good guy tanks, they're always Shermans, right? But then there were like 5 of them run into that Tiger tank, who for no reason is kind of alone in this spot, and it's just watching and hanging out. And that's as inaccurate as that may be, it's this really cool scene because the Tiger, it was rare, it was rarer in World War II, but it was also really effective. It was like the phantom of the tanks in a sense. It was the tank that you don't want to cross. Whereas the Sherman, it was much more available and maybe a little bit more dependable, but it couldn't really withstand against the firepower and whatnot. So it has this great scene where you have these little good guy Sherman tanks, and Shermans look even more, and I could be biased because I'm an American, so I've grown up with, seeing Shermans, as you go into little small towns and stuff, sometimes they'll have them as their center place there. It's like, oh, hi, but they also have this rounder look to them. They look smaller and rounder and just like little bubbles in a sense. Yeah. Whereas in comparison, the Tiger tank is much more, it's got edges, it doesn't really have sloped sides. The Tiger one doesn't.
It's cubic, square.
It's cubic. It's much more harsher looking. So when that Tiger comes out, it looks and sounds and acts like a bad guy, So I love when movies and stuff like that could personify their weaponry like that, It
takes on a personality. We were talking about that just before, and I said that you actually rode in that tank.
I did. The only Tiger one functions in the whole world. I did it, and it was stars the whole time. It was just amazing because when I was in it, you do have this sense of almost being in the womb of a really strong mother. You know what I mean? Like being at the bosom of a really strong, because when she gets up and gets going, dude, like the sound that she makes, it is befitting of a Tiger. That those engines, man, and it's just utterly amazing, and they just have this presence. It's just I can't talk about it because I'll just gush all over. I loved that was one of the best experiences of my life, was riding in Tiger 131.
Oh wow!
But
it's a star tank. It literally is a star, a movie star. It is a fictional tank and also a reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a good point about the Sherman sort of, people being used to them because they're rounded and stuff like that. They are friendlier looking things, They were designed by car companies that are used to designing consumer cars, and the star was to have rounded cars. And a lot of the looks of those things weren't just based on practicality. It was also based on the aesthetics of the people that made them. So they were made, by Chrysler and Cadillac and things like this. And they look like a car company's version of a tank. They look like consumer things. Whereas the German stuff was made by Krupp, companies like this that make heavy machinery and mining equipment and stuff like that, not cars. And they look like huge mechanical things. And the Germans they really couldn't work out how to make sloped plates and stuff like this, really fit together in a way that was going to stop a shell. They could only really think in terms of right angles stuff. So that's why all their stuff had that look. So
the later Tigers use sloped armor, but the original one, the one in the movie, there was no sloping on it really, and that is, even though that was a negative point for the tank itself, it's so great in the movie because it provides all the more contrast visually.
Yeah.
You know, like this is the polar opposite to this. Not polar, but you know, this is the antithesis to these guys.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly. It's so massive a difference, and it's really visually obvious. Yeah, it's like that. The whole German army, like, you know, German military machines were all very kind of square looking. You know, the battleships are the same kind of thing, very square kind of look. So in film and fiction, it really does help. And things that are based on that, like Star Wars, again, take those aesthetic clues and things to in the look of their designs and machinery. You know, you look at the difference in like the first Star Wars film or Empire Strikes Back. Look at the what are they? Star Destroyers. Huge angular wedges, grey angles. Then the Mon Calamari cruisers are all rounded and organic looking. So they're exactly the Shermans and the Tigers again, you know, in that version. So yeah, it's very important to code those things in that way. It really makes a distinction between the good guys and the bad guys. Yeah. So good guys are rounded.
They don't have sharp offensive colors, you know, they don't, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say they don't have reds, but they aren't made simply out of reds. You know, you take somebody like Captain America and he has blues as well and stuff. So it's like, anyway, that's getting off the whole notion. That's just going more into general good guy, bad guy coding. But
well,
that's neat stuff.
Weapons have that layer to them. It's important to remember. Yeah. You can think of any weapons that have come up in films and you can always find the coding to them. Well, we're running a bit long here, so okay, I'll bring up one of my favorite films with a lot of weapons in. It was ridiculous. The Tremors series of films. I love those films. Tremor, fantastic. You guys like the Tremors films too?
I only remember seeing the first one. I know I've seen a few of the others, but I liked it from what I remember. It was just a long time ago, but it was it was good.
Well, yeah, so
the first one is one of my favorite movies of ever.
Tremors is a hell of a lot of fun, and one of the characters was, I can't remember the guy's name, but he used to play the dad in Family Ties.
Oh right, yeah. So I was trying to think of like what are the weapons in Tremors? Like, oh yeah, of course that guy.
Yeah, so he was like a hippie kind of, like a in Family Ties he was a hippie. He'd been to Woodstock and all this. In Tremors he's the exact opposite. He's a gun nut, and him and his wife, I think it's Reba McEntire. They live on a like a compound, and they have every weapon imaginable, like everything, machine guns and shotguns and rifles, and it's his dream come true to fight the graboids.
That's right. Yeah,
he can do everything he wants. And
they're living out in the middle of nowhere, preparing for a disaster that never comes. Finally, it
comes. So in the second film, you know, he's not in it, but he comes in it. Like the graboids come back, and he comes in this truck from the Mexican army, this gigantic truck, and in it he's got this enormous, like 20mm rifle. It's gigantic because he thinks he's going to be facing the same, you know, graboids as before, and they were really hard to kill. And he's got this gigantic, like anti-tank rifle. But the graboids this time are these little tiny hoppy things. And there's many of them. And this big gun is useless. So he got this big gun for no reason. And it takes ages to load it and fire it. And, you know, in one scene, it's the only option to shoot at them. And he's only got one shot, and he fires at it. And it's so big that it blows up the little graboid monster, and it goes through his truck and destroys that as well. It blows up the engine. So yeah, that was a fantastic outing for his ridiculous big weapons. And he's in that film, they use the weapons as a comedic kind of thing, as well as being the only way they can destroy or get rid of the graboids. It's also like they're a weirdly comedy prop as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, this idea of, these guys that live out in the middle of the desert and are able just to kind of amass these weapons. Because we see the same kind of thing in Terminator 2 as well, in that one scene. And it's so striking because it's not very long that they're out in the middle of the desert where, that family has started like hoarding weapons, like down helicopters and stuff. But it really stuck in people's memory of that movie. And I think one of the reasons why that's so alluring is because, like, those are the people that, that's like eccentric people, or, they're living on the fringes of society. But at the same time, there's something almost romantic about it, because it's the idea that these are people that are 100% independent and they sustain themselves. And that's why they're able to kind of like live off the grid, or, away from the eye of Big Brother in this pocket of nowhere in like New Mexico or something, where they're able to amass these things, and it's a really interesting idea how we can kind of fall in love with that idea. It's dangerous, but at the same time, it's something that you kind of want as well.
Yeah, it's alluring, because it means independence, and it means power, and it means you've got the ability to defend yourself, which is why, people do that in reality. You have preppers and things like that. They have the fantasy of defending themselves against some unknown enemy, some imagined straw man version of the government that's going to be able to I'll defeat them all with my AR-15. I can kill them all. So it doesn't make any logical sense, but because it's based on that idea of the fiction in the films, it's alluring. It's romantic.
Especially when that came out in the 80s, because there was the idea of minimal interference from the government and stuff like that. And so there was really room for this sort of idea of the individual as a self-sustaining God, whatever you would want to call it, with these massive amount of weapons. It was really palatable back in the 80s. Right now, I think if you made something like that, it really depends. It's like, the individual would probably have to be kind of more quieter toned, or else you'd get almost like this person is obviously prepping for like Columbine or something like that. We see things differently now.
That has totally reversed. So the people, I think there was Far Cry, one of those video games, had those kind of people as the bad guys. And I think that they do crop up as bad guys. There's people who, the gun nut has become a bad thing now. So the Family Ties guy, I can't remember his name, the actor. So he would become a bad guy in films.
Michael Gross.
Michael, that's it. Yeah. Funnily enough, in his in the fourth version of Tremors, the fourth film, I think it's in that particular version they set it back in time. So they're in the Old West, and the weapons they've got are all, this weird, the pistols and that kind of stuff. And his character hates weapons and deplores violence and guns anytime, doesn't even know what a gun is, has no idea of it. And the whole, the Graboids coming can actually transform him into a guy who likes guns. And he goes...
Is he playing the great-grandfather of that guy, or...?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That is, I recommend it. It's a great fun film. It's a lot of fun. If you want to get into the Tremors universe, Tremors 3 is crap. Tremors
they did a series too, didn't they? They with Michael Gross. I didn't see. The only one I've seen is the first one. I tried watching the others, but I couldn't get into them.
No, it felt like Tremors 3 to me. It's CGI and yeah.
First one is so great though.
Oh really?
It's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, the first film.
Movie.
Yeah. The first film's fantastic.
That's all. That's the only one I've seen. Yeah. Although I think I have the 4 in like a DVD thing somewhere, but I still haven't watched them.
I'd be interested to hear your opinions, because I liked 1, 2, and 4, and I didn't like 3. So I'd be interested to see what you like.
I love that idea of the Old West one. Yeah, I'll dig it up and watch it.
Oh yeah, it really ramped up the comedy as well. Which we're going off track here. So comedy horror. I love.
Yeah, so
don't like horror, but comedy horror. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so weapons in fiction, a lot of fun.
Yeah, fun stuff. Killing graboids.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to the Lethal Weapon Cast, the Weapon Cast.
Thank you.
This is QUACKCAST 423. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.